talk, what would you, MRI, what would you like to start? You want to start O-line, decision-making, style of play, or get into Coach Rhule's press conference when he talked about things like, I watched the tape. The tape jumped off at me. Where you want to start?
That's a lot. We can start with the defensive, I guess coordinator and kind of defensive line shift that we're seeing.
So ultimately, what do you think was if you had to like sequence the undoing of such a swift decision, where do you think it started?
Mid-October.
Minnesota?
Yeah, Minnesota, mid-October. I think. I mean that the press conference. I actually went back and rewatched it.
I
The
ooh,
press
I
conference.
know you.
Uh, yeah, I mean it just he was disgusted.
Mm.
He was disgusted, and I think it was one of those things where maybe the preaching of one of us, and I think when you're trying to build a culture like he's trying to build, when you sense right there may not be someone that's one of us or may not be all the way in the way you feel like it needs to be. um I feel like it probably just crept up on him. I mean, not crept up on him, but just stayed in him and kind of grew even more and more as the season went on after the comments after Minnesota. But I just feel like there was. I mean, we talked about. I think even just structurally, there was a disconnect. Right, we talked about run fits with pass coverage and how we're boxing, spilling all that stuff. Not even get to the semantics, but you can just tell that there's an inconsistency there of how things are being played. And again, I was always under the impression, with Butler, how much I kept saying it. It was my way of saying it. Like can't wait to the spring to see kind of what is Butler's defense truly, because I never really felt like this was his defense, right? I felt like he was, given something to kind of continue on and and try to improve upon or try to even keep it in a level reasonable from where Tony White had it, especially with the run defense, but also understanding the personnel and things we had coming back. So I would say, I guess, definitely, around Minnesota around that time, and it could have been earlier. I think for him to go out and publicly say, I think maybe there could have been some senses of it earlier. Really not feeling like the guys are getting put in the best position, or even it just sound like given the confidence on a Monday through Thursday or Monday through Friday type of thing, to where the kids feel like they're ready to go and they want to go play hard for you. So, and obviously, with all the talk of Aurich, it sounds like he's a guy that brings energy, builds groups, as far as units on defense and has them playing together. So, the hire, in a sense, to me, it's almost like a Bo Pelini to Mike Riley, in the sense that we want to make sure we have a very concise, clear change of philosophy of how we're doing things. Right? We want to make sure that the image of how we do things and the optics of it, just by who is in charge, right? That you should know, hey, we're doing things a little bit differently, or a lot differently, honestly, if you think of the spectrum, if you think of that comparison. So I think it definitely was way less anything about scheme, schematics, what Butler could put together game plan wise. Something about on that second floor, that third floor of the coach's office on a day in, out basis. I don't think Rule saw, him maybe as, being one of us and fully bought into how he's trying to build the program. And you got the head, the headset, you got the right to make that call and continue to try to get the right guys in the building to build the program the way you want it.
You said something I think is interesting. I touched on it the last couple of days in passing because it just started to click. I don't know. It was either Sam or Brian Christopherson that got my wheels turning, but everybody harkens back to because I think you and I agree. You stop the run with effort and toughness, right? Like
Yeah.
that's number one and 1A. And in 2023, everybody talks about, oh man, remember how many helmets and hats they had to the ball, and Nebraska was such a good tackling team, and
Right.
right. So, and I go back to year one. I'm like, okay, so what was it about year one? All right, you get Knighton and Coop. They've worked together. Tony White has a clear vision. It's a very simple scheme, right? They
Yeah.
didn't they didn't do a ton. So
Right.
it allowed you to play really, really fast, right? Just do this, right? Solve problems with aggression. Then
Right.
year two, it was okay, we have a few more guys back. We can do a little more. So you saw a few flashes, right? tackling wasn't as good, but you also added more to the plate, right? Which maybe can slow down processing. So if you're right and you're thinking year 2 to year 3, all right, we were pretty good against the run, didn't give up a ton of points. Let's work on getting off the field on third and longs, which is why I think they incorporated so much dime this year
Hmm.
and really focused on the pass defense, and some other things got away from them, right?
Right.
If you're right in terms of, I wonder if we just wanted to build on and in year 3, because remember in those early press conferences, Coach Rule said, to John's credit, we can do a little bit more because this is year 3. And before he decided on a new defensive coordinator, he talked about how many of the principles that he liked from Coach White's defense.
Right.
So, which would lead me to believe
Yeah. Yeah.
you're probably right in that the evolution of it. But what do you think was why do you think it was so difficult to implement the philosophy? Did you think they tried to be too multiple too fast, or like where do you think it went wrong with just the core philosophy of what they wanted to be, not necessarily skipping to how they
I
want
would.
to do it?
Yeah, I would say again the contrasting styles. Going back to even the previous question. So think about obviously you have guys like Robinson, Hutch, um, Butler, some other guys
Yeah,
too.
man.
Bullets, right? You got some guys that the way you're gonna solve your problems in the run game, right, and run fits is gonna be different than how you're gonna solve it with the guys we have this year, right? So I think like you said, Tony White's system is very simplistic, and I don't think they needed to have a lot of answers because, like you said, we can solve a lot more problems with physicality, some toughness up front between the A and B gaps with the guys interior wise, and then also other guys on that defense. So I think Butler thrown into his first opportunity to be a coordinator was presented with, I think, two problems, and I think it's tough. I mean, unless you're like going into a Nick Saban, Lanning, Smart, one of those type of guys system where it's like, hey, this has been shown to work since, football has become what football is, or with the evolution of it with the spread and stuff like that. So we're gonna run this system, right? No matter who the defense coordinator is at Oregon after Tosh Lapoy leaves. Trust me, they're still running Dan Lanning's defense. So I think the answers that Butler had to have in order for this defense, this unit, this personnel to be successful, I think that's a tough position to put them in. And then too, I'm not creating my own answers. I'm being handed, right, someone else's answers. And now I have to figure out where these answers go with the questions and the problems we get on a Saturday. And I think that's a tough position for any defensive coordinator. I think it may work more for offensive side with play call and things like that. But as a defensive guy, you have to own and know your structure, right? You have to own and know the checks, right? Where we're weak at, we make these calls and really have dove into it. And, I just don't think Butler, I'm not saying he didn't get a fair shake as far as opportunity to be a DC, but I do think in some ways he was a little bit hand tied in the sense that, hey, this is the
Well,
structure we've been doing the last 2 years. We're going to continue on and try to evolutionize that, but just with different players. And it looks different. It's going to look different.
all right, I'm just spitballing here. What if I came back to you and I said, okay, let's suppose that thought process is right. What do you think the ownership is from JB when he's selling kind of a vision and philosophy? Because I do think that's obviously part of it, right? He's going to say,
Hmm.
"Hey, Coach Rule, this is what I want to accomplish. This is what I like."
Right.
Because Coach Rule, I don't think is going to say, "Hey, just do this." I think it might have been more like, "Hey, what are some pieces that we can keep versus what you want to add to?"
Mm.
So if you're operate if that happened, at what point do you think, like, what would be the barometer if you're still trying to sell a vision? Are you just looking at if guys are playing hard, if you're regressing, is it both? Like, if so I'm saying if I'm selling you on a vision, at what point are you not believing what I'm telling you? Because that's ultimately what happens when you
Yeah,
when
that's
you pull
ultimately
the plug,
happens.
right?
I think it can happen in various ways, but I think the quickest way to lose guys in the room is a continued showing of a lack of confidence,
Mm.
right? In an outward way, right? You know what I mean? In those team meetings, we got, the good, bad, and ugly plays from Saturday, and right, there's not a lot of correcting. Things feels personal, or it doesn't feel like there's any development after maybe the coaching part of it, right? That's one way you can lose guys. And I'm not saying this is what happened, but
Yeah,
just
I'm
being in a
just
football
getting
locker
to
room, yeah, just
football.
being in yeah, football. I think also too, if guys aren't seeing you necessarily, they don't feel like, we're getting the same game plan from last week, right? From a defense side, hey, we did all this last week, right? And we saw the results of that. So we're not changing anything. Like, we're not doing anything different, right? So now it feels like, I'm just kind of just going by and or getting by necessarily, or per se, with the with things we've done before, and it hasn't shown any success. And I think if you continue to do things like that, players understand that, hey, we've made this call, 3, 4 times the past week in this situation, and we giving up the first down, third down, we giving up the big long run. Um, and so I think
I think the
you just
yards
lose
through
you lose
the
a lot of
air.
confidence. You just lose a lot of confidence in those guys.
Yeah, the yards through the air down the stretch were equal, or were probably more damning, in my
Yeah, and
opinion.
I think that may have given the validity to maybe what Rule was feeling, or maybe that was something he felt, convicted about, that, hey, like, okay, we were stopping the pass. Like, we can't stop the pass. I'm barely considering bringing you back maybe next year. I know, you kind of like on, what I mean? And that's kind of like
Yeah,
I think maybe a little bit of a breaking point. Like, what happened last, down the stretch, last couple games, just coverage wise, making plays on the ball, being in the right spots on the back end, making tackles right after the catch, those type of things. And, I think, again, when you have pillars, or you have things you want your program to be about, and you start to see that pillar kind of show cracks, you have two choices, try to do a quick fix, or say, hey, let's reconstruct this whole thing, and design it in a way that we won't get that crack in that same spot. And I think that's just the type of person Rule is, obviously seeing that even with Braden being released as well. Just he obviously understand it's on him, right? It's he owns it, and if you feel like guys aren't in a position to help him get this program to the level he sees it, then he has to make that decision, and I don't think anyone can um, you know say Rule, is just not looking out for the best interest of the program. And I think in it through his vision, right? And everyone else has their idea of what that is, but through his vision, um, he's making the moves he feels necessary, and only time will tell.
yeah.
So, MRI, let me ask you this, because you brought something up there about kind of the simplicity of Tony White's defense. And this might be a very stupid non-football person question, but I'm going to ask it because I think about it a lot. It seems like the solution to almost any time a defense isn't going well is to simplify it and make things faster for the guys on the field.
Hmm.
So when is the right time to run a complicated defense, or is it just a thing where defensive coordinators can't help themselves?
I don't know, man. I
That's
look
a
at
good
a guy
question.
like it's a great question
It's a
because
great question.
I look at a guy like Phil Parker, and I bet he would listen to Jim Knowles for about 5 minutes.
Yep. It's a
But they're both
shh.
good at what they do.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. Or maybe it's like an NFL thing where it's like, hey, like in the NFL, you kind of have to have all this other stuff. But in college, at least, it seems like whenever somebody's defense isn't working, they're like, we're going to simplify it. We're going to make our guys
Hmm.
faster, make the thought process out of their heads. And it seems like that always works. So I'm like, why are we starting anywhere else?
Like Phil Parker might say, hey, listen, they're on the right hash. It's 23 and a half yards to make this throw from this hash to that. If they can make that throw and make a living, that's fine. We're going to play quarter half. If you want to make a living doing that, go ahead.
Right.
Versus some guys will say, hey, now listen, if they start to bang this concept because this is here,
Mhm.
then this is what we want to be able to check to. So, the pre-snap look, one sounds like more, why can't we just do it this way? But
Mhm.
both
Hmm.
coaches can be effective
I
into
think it.
how they want to get there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, and I think what that comes down to, what is your capacity to teaching the system
That
and being able to troubleshoot the problems that come along with it? And I think that's where, offense coordinators get in trouble with that, defense coordinators, like we're just grab bag. I'm grabbing what I feel like, I've seen works in other situations with other people without taking the time, right, to actually study it, right? Let me see the positive clips of this play. Let me see the negative clips of this play. Let me see the indifferent ones, right? Let me see the different structures I'm getting the teams are using to stop this, right? And that's how innovation happens, right? As far as with football. So, I think it's very important, and that's why I kind of, again, not taking anything, removing any blame per se from Butler and the defense's performance this year, but again, if you don't have the capacity to teach that system in its fullness and like within everything, you're hindering yourself, right? You're playing with one hand behind your back tied up, right?
Mhm.
Because you don't know necessarily what the problems are going to come from you playing, a bare front, right, and slanting your D line to a certain gap. Been fitting the linebackers based on how maybe Tony White wanted to fit it, but as you're looking at it, maybe it should be differently, right? And how you're going about that process to get there on throughout the week is important too. But the capacity to be able to teach a system is important, and it has to be something that you talk about. Knight and Coop having a relationship. Um, that's something that a whole staff has to have a process, a connection with one another, that where we all have ownership of the system and owning a part of the system and having a little bit of understanding of what's going on in front of me. I would think Coop knew and understood, like, taught his safeties how they were fitting off of the movement of the up the front of the defensive lineman, right? And I just think if you have that in your staff, then you definitely have more opportunities of success on game days.
It just seems like over the last handful of years, the more they tried to do, the worse it got. But you also have so many new bodies too. So there had to
Yeah.
be like a almost a clean break and where you pause and you say, okay, we like these parts, but we're not there yet. So let's do this, which is why I
Hmm.
think with Aurich coming in and because Coach Rhule, he was very telling in a couple of his comments about specifics where, hey, I'd like a 270-pound in, not a 270-pound three tech,
Hmm.
right? Or I want, we introduce now these bigger body types of some guys that we've recruited, like Malcolm Simpson or Tyson Terry. Like I immediately think, okay, those guys are one or three techs, right? They're
Right.
not trying to play. Not, it's different because you can play a shade in the one. They're
Right.
not trying to play with
But
two
yeah, you don't have to be
or
able to play down. I feel like everyone had to be able to at least understand or play down each technique of the
and they
defensive
and they
line.
weren't good enough at it to be
Exactly. Yeah.
confident and violent, right? And
Yep.
I go back to, and I hate to keep saying this, is like the sixth time I've told this story, but it was very, very, very enlightening on accident to hear Van Poppel tell me about the differences between the doubles he felt based on where he was playing on the line.
Yep.
And he was just
Big difference.
really
Big
smart,
difference.
man. And I was captivated. And so I just sit and listen to him, right? And he knows ball. And he said, sometimes when I'm in this technique and I feel this double, like I just want to go back to the bench and say, man, can I just play this from a one?
Hmm.
And I was just thinking, that football IQ, like you covet that as a coach,
Right.
right? Like, come back and tell me that. How many times have you said to a player, what are you seeing? And they say they're being triple teamed. And it's like, no, you're not. Like,
Right.
coach, man, I'm being triple teamed. Not, okay. Scratch that question. I'll just go watch the iPad. But
Yep.
you want that kind of feedback from a player. And this was on the heels of, I told this to Ravi the other day. A guy asked me at a talk I was in Nebraska City. He was really familiar with, he's a big Chiefs fan. And he's like, do you think our guys tried to learn too many positions being too versatile? Like almost never got good at the one thing
Right.
before.
Jack of all trades, master.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like when
Yeah.
Ari would play in a three, then we could be in a wide nine. Like it's cool to be able to do
If you actually
if
can
you're
do
polished enough
Yeah.
at one thing to do
Yeah.
it. You know what I mean? So I think when he's describing the simplicity of just attacking, I think those are the roots that he wants to go back to as a defensive guy, right? Like not overthink it, just play fast.
Yeah. Just play fast and again have guys master a
Just
single
simple.
position or just single position. Not even, I mean, you say position, you're still, if you have to line up in a one through three if you're on the inside. But I think it's more about you have to, okay, you have a system now. It's finding the body types, right? Again, you talk about going back to a 270 end. That's, I mean, you have to think of a J anchor. Like we had those base type ends, right? That were going to play towards the tight end, is going to be able to handle a tight end and tackle double team. And then you had guys on the backside like a Randy, right? That can get off with
Yeah, that
the
could be
backside
that
tackle.
that could be a Wanari playing opposite Dylan Rogers, right? Or
Yeah, for
Miller, right?
sure. You know what I mean? Yeah, for
That's
sure.
that's
I can definitely see
270
that.
opposite 235,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's
Right,
an
correct.
under four down kind of front look.
Right. And but I think the interesting part for me, at least once I, see the system, with Nebraska is, what do they do with that third safety, that fifth DB, would
Yeah.
that be in the slot? Would that be a true nickel? Right? Is it gonna be a true nickel guy, true cover guard? You're trying to go, are you gonna play still a three high structure there with those guys? So that'll be interesting to see. I watched a couple of games as much as I could of San Diego State's defense, and one thing I do appreciate, I don't know how, again, how much it translates, but they play fast to their fits, like
Yeah.
at all, on the second and third level, and I'm hoping that's something that can translate to Nebraska with their guys, because it's not like they were just seeing everything, and if you're seeing and you're moving that fast, there has to have been a preparation, right? A
Right,
process of
right.
preparation that happened.
When you can trigger, you're either like I watched Rodriguez from Tech. I don't know how he's gonna test. He doesn't strike me as like this elite level athlete. But
Hmm.
one thing I do know, he's free to be. He's you talk about free to be me. He's a cloudy, clear, see it, fit it. Like those
Hmm.
guys look like they're playing fast.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so when I watch SDSU and guys are triggering from the third and second level, they either have really clean rules
Hmm.
or the defense is in such a way where it's very sequential. If he does
Yeah.
this, then I'm doing that. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
it because I mean they're fitting now.
Hmm.
There is there's no lateral shuffles, right? I mean these guys are playing at 45s downhill.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They're taking good angles too. I mean, it looked good. Now again, I think the speed of those guys, maybe a little bit more athleticism, especially at the, I think up front and the interior, just with being smaller guys. And um, again, how do they recruit into the system now in the Big Ten? And I think that's going to be the big thing with Ork, and how they go about figuring out what kind of body types we want to fill with those front six guys, and how does that work within the structure of what obviously Rule wants to get accomplished, but
He
also the new defense coordinator.
he's had to have they had to have talked about it because for Rule to mention, and I'm not saying he these guys are the answer
Hmm.
specifically, but when you mention guys by name and body types, it's been discussed, right? He goes, well,
Yeah.
you introduce bigger body types of some young guys that we brought into the program, so it's clear they've talked about interior play and what they want it to look like, right? Because
Right.
you wouldn't just pull those guys out of thin air if it hadn't been broached, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure. No, those guys have to be up for the conversation, and I'm sure I've been in the process of trying to get a new job and things like that. I mean, I'm sure Oryx has found some time to watch some of the film, see some of the guys. Obviously, I mean, we got what 90 some guys coming back next year supposedly. I mean, could come back.
Yeah.
That's sophomores or juniors or younger. So, I mean, there's a lot of potential, and I think if you get somebody that has a clear philosophy, clear vision for what they want on the defense side of the ball. I mean, if you turn over every stone, I'm sure you can find some guys that can play in this system, play in this scheme. And again, I think you win two or three ball games just from connection, just pure connection. And I think if he's the guy that they say that he is in his relationship building and getting guys to play hard and getting guys to play fast. If what we see from San Diego State translates to Lincoln, I mean, I think this is a home run hire. I mean, obviously there's a process to it. There's gonna be things that are gonna be uncomfortable and may lose some guys, and maybe we expect it to be in the rotation or be helping out this next year. But I'm excited to see how this defense comes together, and seeing a preview of it in the spring.
Mm, that is our guy. Michael Rose-Ivey, terrific stuff as always, MRI. Appreciate the time, and we will talk to you again soon. Hopefully, when we've got a new defensive line coach, we can go over as well.
Yeah, that'd be great, man. They can actually pull off Elijah Robinson from and get him away from LSU. That'd be huge.
Well, I don't know if you've spent any time on LSU's message boards, but they're in full-on meltdown mode, which is terrific.
Well, they ain't the only message board that's in full meltdown right now.
Yeah, wow. You're kidding.
Yeah,
All right, my guy. We're looking for violence. That's what we want. Violence.
that's when we need violence and
Violence
aggression.
up front. Yep.
There we
Yes,
go.
sir.
Appreciate it, MRI. We'll talk to you later.
Yes, sir.
All right, buddy.